Hi everybody, I'm Jeff.
And I'm Linda.
And welcome to Ghost Hunting 101, where we're going to be talking a little bit about the history and some of the methods that are used in paranormal investigation. Unfortunately, with the year of 2020, we can't do this in person.
Yes.
So it's our pleasure to at least be able to bring it virtually. Ghost hunting, when we trace it back to the first perhaps paranormal investigation recorded, it goes way back to 74 BC. And this was a man, he was a philosopher named Athenodorus. And he's renting this room. And every night he would wake up to this man that would come out to him in chains. And he'd wake up, he'd see this man standing there in his room just rattling these chains around. And he'd be startled, but the guy would walk out of his room, and of course he wouldn't follow him.
Right.
So he decides this is a mystery. This guy is showing up here every night. What's going on? So one night he follows this guy. He follows him out to a courtyard where the man in chains, the spirit in chains, disappears. So right at the spot where this man disappeared, Athenodorus, he believes that perhaps there's a reason for that. Perhaps there's something there that this specter wants me to find. So what he does is he starts digging right there in the courtyard and ends up finding these bones, this skeleton bound in chains. So this is perhaps, like I said, the first documented paranormal investigation ever.
Wow. That's amazing. There is also the story of the Witch of Endor from the Bible that is a little bit of has a paranormal twist to it as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, with the Witch of Endor, it happens in 1 Samuel 28. Now, in this time, King Saul, he exiles all the witches and wizards from the land, banishes them. And him and his sons, they're getting ready to go into battle with the Philistines. And at this point, God has turned his back on Saul because Saul has been disobedient. So God has not given him the answers he wants. He's not given him the comfort he wants as he's getting ready to go into this huge battle. So he wants to speak to Samuel. Samuel, he seeks him out in spiritual form. And to do this, what he does is he approaches the Witch of Endor. And he asks her, he goes in disguise and he says, could you bring forth the ghost of this prophet so he can prophesize for me? And the Witch of Endor, she summons the ghost of Samuel. And the ghost of Samuel appears before him and says, surely you and your sons will all fall in battle tomorrow. Now, the Witch of Endor at this point, she recognizes Saul. He was in disguise. And she says, why have you tricked me? Now you're going to banish me from the land. You're going to sentence me to death. Something to that effect. And Saul says, no, I'm not going to do that. I just need to speak to Samuel. That's all I needed. So this is another incident that's actually in the Bible where it talks about a ghost coming forward and prophesizing. A lot of people have different theories on this. Some believe it was the devil at work. Some believe it wasn't really the ghost of Samuel. But the Bible, taken literally, it does say that this was indeed the ghost of Samuel.
Right, and the Bible does make certain distinctions between what would be considered a devil or a demon of some sorts and other spirits as well.
Absolutely.
It makes those distinctions. So,
That's right.
fascinating story, not only because it's from the Bible, but also because it illustrates how a spirit comes back from heaven. It's already in heaven.
Right.
And yet it comes back from heaven because it's summoned.
Well, when Samuel was summoned, he even said, why did you disturb me?
Right.
So whether he was in heaven, whether he was in some kind of a slumber, we don't know. But he was conscious that he had been disturbed. He had been brought back from death to answer this question.
Right. Yeah. That also brings up the Fox sisters. Now, the Fox sisters were a pair of sisters back in the late 1800s who were one of the reasons why there was a rise in what they call the spiritualist or spiritualism movement. And this basically says that people can communicate with the spirits of the dead. And the reason why they sort of gave rise to this was because they were supposedly mediums. They lived in this house and they were haunted by this spirit. It would knock on the walls at night while they're trying to sleep. Eventually, this spirit kind of led them down to the basement where they decided that there was something in the basement that the spirit wanted them to find. And they ended up finding that there was the dead body of one of the previous owners stuck in the wall. And it was the spirit of this dead man that was trying to tell them, hey, I've been murdered and put into the wall here. Now, because of their ability to communicate with the spirits this way, they started touring the country. They became somewhat of celebrities around the country, and they started sort of showing how that they could communicate with spirits, and they started seances and things. That's when there became this huge rise of seances in the country, and it was sort of a fascinating time because it seems that whenever there are any major wars in the country, that's when the spiritualism sort of has this it sort of gets revamped. People are really wanting to speak to their dead relatives and people that are perhaps dead from war, and they want to say one last goodbye to them. So they ended up using these spiritualists. Now, of course, a lot of them were not real mediums. They ended up finding out that they were fake, and that
Right.
Yep, that
With
brings
all
us-
these people reaching out, trying to find out, seeking their dead loved ones, it became very easy for someone who was very perceptive. A lot of these false mediums, they were very perceptive.
Right.
And they could tell a lot about a person just by looking at them, by asking some general questions.
Yes.
And they would basically take these people's money
Right.
and lead them to believe, they'd rig up the table and everything else,
Yeah.
lead them to believe that they were communicating with a deceased loved one,
Yes.
someone who was lost at war, and giving them the answers that they wanted.
Right. Yes. Now that gives rise to the Ghost Club. The Ghost Club was formed in London, correct?
Yes, in 1862, and this included some prominent members. Charles Dickens was a member of it. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was a member. And this was one of the first groups that tried to bring in some scientific methods. They tried to come up with methods for paranormal investigation that would either debunk the claims or prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that
Right.
they were paranormal, that they were paranormal in nature, that there was something there. And out of this club came men like Harry Price. Harry Price was one of the first persons to use the term ghost hunter. He was even had a book out about where he used that term. And he, like I said, one of the pioneers. He used a lot of interesting methods. He thought outside the box. He would use a bowl of mercury to detect tremors. He'd put felt on the bottom of his shoes to keep silent during EVP sessions. He'd use recorders. He'd set up video cameras and still cameras and rig them to snap pictures of something move throughout the house. But what he also did that was very important, he really knew how to deceive people. He knew how to go out on stage and basically tell somebody he was communicating with their past loved one. Tell these people information, and they'd be so shocked. How does he know all this?
Yeah.
Then he would explain it. He'd say, well, I'm not communicating with the spirit. I actually figured it out by A, B, C, and D, by being perceptive. And he came about and he said, this is what mediums do. He said, a lot of these people that are out there saying they're mediums, they're not. They're deceiving you.
Right.
So he debunked a lot of these mediums that were going around taking people's money. But not only did he do that, he also came up with some significant tests, and there were a few people that he was able to say, look, this ability of mediumship does exist.
Yes.
Psychic abilities do exist, because he had this basically impassable test that if you weren't a medium, there was no way you were going to get through it.
Yeah, yeah. So there were actual mediums that he found. They were just more rare than what people were making out. I
Absolutely.
suppose.
Absolutely. And that brings about, with all this stuff that's going on, and this is kind of, the rest is, as they say, history. You know, in the 50s and 60s, sci-fi became more popular, and
Right.
ghost stories and horror movies, and of course with cable TV, you know, in the late 90s, early 2000s, they started coming out with the
Right.
ghost hunter shows and brought it to a broader audience, people that were like amazed that these people are out there looking for ghosts and the techniques that they use and everything else.
Yeah.
When you're getting a call, when we do paranormal investigations, the primary thing we do, and I got to say, we've been through some of the most haunted places on the East Coast. But a lot of the investigations we do now are residential investigations. Right. People call us out to their house because they have something strange going on, something they can't explain. A lot of people ask, well, how much do you get paid for that? Or what does it cost? Yeah. One rule of thumb is you don't charge anything for a paranormal investigation. No one, if you ever call anybody out for an investigation, they should not charge you a dime. Right. We do this purely out of the fact that we have a passion for exploring the unknown and unexplained. Yes. And also we found out that we can use that passion to try to help certain people, yes, which we can delve into a little bit further down. Mm-hmm. But when we take this approach, when we go into these people's houses, the first thing we want to do is rule out any possible explanations, any rational explanations. Mm-hmm. And once these are ruled out, which we'll go into depth into how to do that a little further down here in the lecture. But once that is ruled out, you got to consider the types of hauntings. Yes. Now, before we go into the types of hauntings, I have to say, this what we're presenting is theory that is commonly accepted in the paranormal field. Right. Okay? Obviously, spirits have not been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. Yes. I mean, we could say, hey, there's some solid evidence out there. But if you ask the scientific community, they're going to say there's not solid evidence of it. Right. So the types of hauntings as we go into an investigation. Yeah. The first type of haunting is called a residual haunting. A residual haunting is what's most commonly found at a battlefield. When people walk by, and there's been stories from Yorktown where people have walked by and seen soldiers out in the field like they're battling. There's been stories like this in Gettysburg. Yes. Even Yorktown. Yorktown, yes. Yeah. And these events just keep replaying themselves time and time again. It's the same exact event, the same pattern. Right. None of these spirits interact with anybody. They don't make eye contact. Yes. It's the case where someone's husband passed away, and they hear his footsteps come in the door at the same time every night, walk down the hallway, make the same sounds he would make when he was here. Right. These are residual hauntings. Yeah. They're not actually believed to have a conscious spirit. They're not actually... So hypothetically, for example, you're in battle. It's the Civil War. And you're in this huge battle. Now that battle replays itself time and time again when the atmospheric conditions are right. It replays itself. And you see everyone that was involved in that battle clashing on that battlefield. Not everybody in that battle died in that battle. So hypothetically speaking, if you were involved in that battle and survived, you might be walking past that site 5 years later and see a residual haunting of yourself. Right. The theory is that the energy, the emotion, these things were so great at the time of this event that it kind of burned itself onto the atmosphere. And when those conditions are right, it replays itself time and time again. Right. And I think there's a lot of hauntings that actually can be explained as residual. We encounter a lot of them where people will smell things like bacon cooking in the morning when nobody's up cooking bacon. Even smells, or the lingering smell of a tobacco pipe that their father used to smoke before he died. That sort of thing can be residual as well. It's not just things that you see or things that you hear. Right. So, and one thing that a lot of people don't mention that we've come to believe, to split this apart a little further, a residual haunting is typically going to only involve 4 of the 5 senses. Okay, right. Typically 3, but on occasion it can be 4. Yes. Okay, and those 3 senses are: you can see it sometimes, sometimes you can smell it, right? Sometimes you can hear it. Exactly. Sometimes it's all 3 of those together. But other times you can taste it. And this would be, for example, where you're walking into a kitchen, no one's cooking bacon, but you can smell it so strong that you can literally just kind of taste that bacon in the air. Yeah. So these are types of residual hauntings. If something is touching you, if something is making contact with you, it's most likely not residual, which brings us to our next type of haunting. Right. These are intelligent hauntings. And by intelligent haunting, we mean that there is some spirit at work here, whether it be a human spirit who was passed over and decided not to go beyond the veil or up to heaven, wherever you believe that they go.
or whether it's some sort of a spirit like a demon. There are many different types of intelligent hauntings. Like I mentioned, there's the human spirit that stays behind, normally because they have some sort of unfinished business. The spirit of a young mother may stay behind because she wants to look out after her children. The spirit of a man may stay behind because he feels like he's leaving his wife kind of in a bad situation by dying. So these are often tragic endings for a person's life. Most of the time, they seem like they're kind of sudden and unexpected deaths that cause a person to stay behind. But not always. That's not always the case. Now, we also have things like poltergeists. And poltergeist, there's a lot of questions surrounding what a poltergeist actually is. Some people claim that a poltergeist is just a very noisy ghost. That's indeed what the word poltergeist means in German, I believe. It means noisy ghost. Some people in recent years have theorized that a poltergeist is actually an entity that is manifested from the human psyche. Most of the time when people experience poltergeists, there is usually a female and usually an adolescent in the household. For some reason that they theorize that the hormones and the emotions and suppressed energy that the person carries with them can give rise to this sort of entity. And it's normally when the person has some sort of psychic powers, perhaps that they don't even know that they have. But oftentimes a poltergeist will be targeted against the parent or another sibling that they dislike the most as well. They're known to bang cabinet doors and, open and close the refrigerator, open and close regular doors throughout the house, and just basically make a lot of noise. So then that brings us to demons. Demons are one of those things that there's a lot of different theories as to how they came about. And there's a lot of question as to what they are. Demons, as we believe in one school of thought, is that demons were brought about by Satan or Lucifer when he was cast out of heaven. And when he was cast out, he came down and sort of formed his own army. And this army is his demons. And these things basically walk around the earth and try to cause chaos and destruction and pain and suffrage wherever they can. And I think that the media nowadays makes it out like there are far more demons in the world and people are experiencing far more scratching and growling and things of that nature than they actually do. In the 6 years I've been investigating with you, I can only say maybe on one hand the number of times that we've encountered something that we thought was demonic. And these are also difficult to get rid of because it doesn't necessarily take just being a member of clergy. It doesn't necessarily take one method or another. It seems to be the faith of the person that is performing the cleansing to try to get rid of it. And there also sometimes has to be a little bit of a change of lifestyle and a change in the way a person thinks to be able to get rid of a demon.
Right. A little bit of growth with that person.
Absolutely.
And this, when you get into demons, this is deep.
It is.
We're actually putting together a whole nother lecture where we're going to just focus on this because people have no idea about some of the stuff that's out there.
Right.
Really don't.
No.
And what's interesting too is how a human spirit can easily be a demonic spirit. It may appear as a human spirit.
Yes.
And the most common case seems to be with children's spirits.
Right.
Someone will see a child spirit, and this is for two reasons. Because they're less intimidating to some people.
Yes.
Where with me, I don't know why, but I mean, the idea of a child spirit is a little more freaky than like
creepy.
An adult spirit.
Yeah.
It is. It is. A little voice echoing through the hall and stuff like that. Not to be mean, but it's creepy. That's why they make so many movies about it.
Probably from that movie, The Shining.
It probably is. The two girls, yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing is, this child will appear often if there's another child in the house, a living child. Mm-hmm. And it will try to gain trust with that child. Children talk about imaginary friends, which sometimes are not imaginary. Yes. And this child will invite them in. And they'll use that as a doorway to come in and wreak havoc on the house.
Right.
They're not actually, and I'm not saying this is all the time, but I'm saying in a lot of cases,
Yes.
it seems that they're not actually the spirit of a little girl. It seems that when this child spirit appears, someone will welcome that child spirit into the house, feel sorry for that spirit, try to interact with it.
Right.
And then next thing you know, they're calling us up saying, this is where it started, and I'm in a very bad place right now.
Yeah.
That has happened quite a bit.
Yes, because demons don't have their own true form. They don't have any corporeal form. They basically take on other forms. They can even influence somebody's mind into believing that they look a certain way. And they can cause somebody who is being what they say demonically oppressed to believe that they're seeing this creature with a bull's nose and horns in the corner, when that's not actually what the demon looks like per se. That's just what they want you to think that they look like.
Right.
So
they want to strike fear, break you down.
And sometimes they can appear as light. Sometimes they can appear as a foggy darkness, just sort of a blackness. They appear in all different forms. So they're really hard to trace, really hard to detect. They tend to hide whenever somebody comes to try to discover if they're there and what the case is. I would say that the people who call us out and say that they have what they believe is something demonic in their house, those are usually the calmest, the most mundane, nothing going on investigations that we actually have. And we believe that it's because these demons probably hide from us if they do truly exist in that house.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. And even the other type of intelligent haunting is considered to be a shadow figure.
Yes.
Now, keep in mind, there's a thin line, and we'll tell you in a minute how to gauge whether it's intelligent or residual. But there is a thin line, and there's also a thin line between the types of intelligent hauntings.
Right.
A shadow figure, just because, and people disagree with me all the time. They say, no, if it's a dark shadow figure, it's evil. No. We've had several cases where nothing bad was happening, but they experienced shadow figures, and it didn't seem like they had ill intent. The house did not have the same feel as houses that had a negative entity, and the people were not experiencing any negative side effects. They were just seeing these things.
Yes.
On another hand, there have been houses where there's been shadow figures, and people had all kinds of things happening, getting dragged out of bed and scratched and everything else.
Yes.
Shadow figures are a mystery.
They are.
They really are. They could be demonic in certain cases. They could be human spirits that perhaps don't have the energy to manifest into a full apparition, and all you can see is their silhouette.
Right.
But there's also the theory, and this is something to delve into in a whole nother lecture, because it's another type of thing that we investigate. There's also been the theory that some cases of shadow figures are actually extraterrestrials. We'll leave it at that, because we don't want to get too off of the ghost hunting 101 onto the UFOlogy.
Right, that's exactly right. And the last kind that I'll just touch on a little bit, because it's perhaps the one that's least known, is things that they call, like earthbound or dimensional creatures. And these are creatures that can pass from one dimension to another. And they include things like gnomes and fairies and pixies and, just all kinds of different little things like that have been in books and in cultural folklore for generations and generations, hundreds of years. But we still kind of group them with the rest of this because it is some sort of creature, some sort of entity.
That we don't know.
Yes, that
to what
has
extent.
some sort of paranormal powers to it. So,
Right.
Lots of different kinds of hauntings.
Yeah, and the difference, the ultimate difference is, the questions to ask to determine if it's residual or intelligent.
Right.
Intelligent, it will acknowledge you.
Right.
Okay, it has a self-awareness. It has an awareness that you're there.
Yes.
It can make physical contact with you.
Right.
Okay, it could be a change of pattern, like talking about the five senses. Like it may be something that you just see, or you just hear, or you just smell, but it's not the same pattern as it's been before.
Yes, it does something different.
Right. Yeah. Right. So one night you hear it walking through your living room, the next night you hear it walking down your hallway.
Yes. Yes. And any change in behavior of the spirit, if you're sitting there looking at the spirit and the spirit changes its normal behavior, it does something that you haven't seen it do before. Oftentimes that's an indication that you're dealing with something intelligent as opposed to residual. So.
Right. Well, let's go into the investigation. Okay, we've learned a little bit about some of the entities, some of the history of ghost hunting.
Right.
Now the actual investigation itself.
Yes.
Okay, so when we get a call to take on a case, we take all cases.
We do.
Some people will gauge them. They'll say, is this person credible? Is this person, is this something we want to investigate? Is it too serious for us? Is it not serious enough?
Right.
We take all cases. If
We
someone's
do.
got something going on, we're going to be there to help them as best we can.
Yes.
And we're going to be straightforward, we're going to be honest with them, and we're going to help them. Some of the equipment that we're going to have, okay? Here's ultimately, and some of this could be obvious,
Right.
but you talk about flashlights, okay? Different lighting sources. It's very important because you're moving around in the dark. A lot of the times we find ourselves in houses that have been vacant for years.
Yeah.
And it's not that we're going out through the woods seeking out these places. Someone will call and say, hey, I bought a house that's been vacant for 10 years.
Right.
We're starting to do renovations and all kinds of crazy things are happening.
Yes.
So it won't have power quite often. There will be the outdoor investigations. It's good to have a light that you can do hands-free because there's so much equipment. There's so much to have, especially we're recording our own investigations too. We don't have a cameraman.
Right.
Because we don't want to bring any more people than are necessary. We want to give the authentic investigation.
Right.
So it's good to have a headlamp. And honestly, my battery mine died quite a bit ago, and it takes like one of those big watch batteries, so I've been flashlight bound for a little bit. But hands-free.
Right.
And I recommend having a light with different settings.
Yes.
Okay, you may say, wow, I want a 500 lumen flashlight that, bam, I can light it down that path and light up the entire woods.
Right.
That's good for outside for an emergency. Like you hear something way out in the woods and you want to make sure it's not a bear coming at you or a person with an axe. Light them up with your 500 lumen flashlight.
Yeah.
But if you're just trying to look at how to work some equipment, if you're trying to read something, or if you're just trying to look at something up close to see how something is set, or just kind of watch your footing,
Right.
you want to go with something much lower.
Right.
I even go with a 50 lumen flashlight. The little tiny mag lights that are very dull, very dim, they're good for this sort of thing because they don't kill your night vision.
Yes.
You want to be able to click on a light and not have it kill your night vision.
Yeah.
And then you hear something down the hallway and it takes, 20 minutes for your night vision to get back to normal.
Right, exactly.
So-
Meanwhile, you can't see.
Right. So a variety of lights are good.
Right.
They are. This other device that we're showing up here is a laser grid pen. And what this does, you project it on a wall and it will put out a laser grid.
Yes.
Okay, you have a camera on this wall, on this laser grid, and it helps you better detect if there's movement. The laser grid the dots, of course, will kind of light up the 3D of whatever figure is standing there. Someone's standing there in front of it. You can detect the movement easier with the laser grid.
Right, right.
And the last basic thing, or one of the basic things I should say, is actually a two-way radio.
Yes.
Two-way radio.
Those are important.
To keep in communication, okay? Those are some of the basics, some of the things that you've probably seen a lot. Now, let's talk about some of the things that we use on the investigation. Of course, a digital voice recorder.
Right.
That's probably the most common thing.
Yes.
And really, if you want to do an investigation, people say, where do I need to get started? A digital voice recorder.
Yeah, that's about it.
That's really it.
Maybe a
Go
camera.
out for yourself. A camera's good to document, but go out for yourself if you want to get started into it and see what you can get. Find the evidence for yourself. Don't worry about what other people think.
Right.
Find it for yourself. But a digital voice recorder is good because it was Edison, theoretically, who talked about coming up with a device that could be so...
Yeah.
Yeah, and they said that he was working on one, which was never found, but it was kind of one of those theories. But he said that this device is so sensitive, it could actually pick up disembodied voices.
Right.
Which the recorder can do.
Yes.
One of my favorite pieces of evidence is an EVP, which stands for Electronic Voice Phenomenon.
Yes.
And those are my favorite kind because you know there was nobody there in the room, yet you hear this voice. Another device that we use would be perhaps the spirit box, which we use in conjunction. Favorite. And Linda, if you want to elaborate on that spirit box, because you usually have to endure the headphones for it.
I do. The spirit box is actually a radio. And back in like the 70s and 80s, we used to take these realistic brand radios, the ones from Radio Shack, And you could modify the circuit board a little bit so that it would continuously sweep through the frequencies. You could choose either AM or FM, and it would constantly sweep through without stopping on any one station. They have devices now that they've created for ghost hunters that do the same exact thing. And they even give you the option of being able to sweep forward through that band or backwards through that band. And it's theorized that spirits can use these little radios somehow to communicate. And we've seen it happen. We believe that it actually works. We're not 100% sure of how it works, but we believe that the spirits can somehow manipulate the radio waves that are coming into the tuner of the radio and can use that by which to communicate. They'll often speak through other radio stations that are coming through, or they'll say things all of a sudden that is just kind of like relevant to the questions that we're asking. We also hear the radio stations at the same time, mind you, but you have to sort of pick through what you're hearing to determine what is relevant and what is not. And oftentimes we will hear one voice that seems to come through, and it'll come through again and again and again, saying different things, but the voice does not come through on the same frequency. It's not like
Right.
always 97.3 that this voice comes through. And that's another indicator that it may be something of a spiritual nature as opposed to something that's just coming through as bits and pieces of radio speech. So it's a fascinating device. We actually attach a splitter to it, and we'll run one cord into a speaker, and then we'll run another cord into a set of headphones. And these are often noise canceling headphones. And I'm usually the one that will put the headphones on so that I can't hear the question that the investigators are asking. But we keep the speaker attached so that other people can hear the responses or hear things coming through the spirit box as well. And what this does is there's something called pareidolia, and this can be auditory or visual pareidolia. In this case, it's audio. You're hearing things that sound like white noise, and you can you can hear what you want to hear.
You piece together an expected response because you hear the question. You say, someone asks, what's your name?
Right.
Now your brain is trying to pull a name from this that's going through, and it will often do that. Where if somebody hasn't heard the question, they're not as quick to hear that name that you thought you heard.
Yes, and it works especially well, or it seems to be successful, whenever I hear something, even though I have the headphones on, and I say, hey, this is what I hear, and the investigators actually hear the same exact thing come through. So, fascinating device.
Yeah, and if you hear something different, people will insist, like, no, it definitely said this.
Yeah.
But think about it. About a year or two ago, there was that Yanni or Laurel thing.
Oh,
if you haven't heard of that, Google it.
Oh,
the Yanni or Laurel. People would play this, and certain people would hear Yanni, other people would hear Laurel. And they would insist, no, this is what it was saying. And we found a way to kind of manipulate it where we could hear both. But it's interesting the way the brain works. It really is.
It is.
Another device, though, we like to use various devices that the spirits can actually interact with, light up to let us know that we're there.
Yes.
Now, what we do is we use EMF detectors. And one of the most common ones that's commonly known as a K2 meter, so we incorporated that into our toolbox.
Right.
What we do when we get to the investigations is what's called a baseline sweep. So we find out, we go around with these EMF detectors during our baseline sweep, and we'll try to find out where all the spikes are. Now, these spikes are given off by electromagnetic fields.
Right.
Comes from electricity, appliances.
Yes.
If there's an air conditioner or a fan or a router, these things will go off the chart.
Right.
So we find out where all these spikes are. Okay? And the reason is it's twofold. If the EMF levels are too high, and the person, part of their reports is, ever since I moved in here, I've been feeling dizzy, I've been getting lightheaded upstairs, I feel like there's something affecting me, could be the EMF levels.
Right.
It could be overexposure to that. A theory is that spirits can use these electromagnetic fields to manifest.
Yes.
So is there a high field in the area where the spirits are manifesting? The third thing is that spirits are believed to give off these electromagnetic fields. So the EMF detectors are supposed to pick up if there's a spirit present.
Right.
Now, we do get some stray spikes with these.
We do.
But the argument has come about, and I know I made this argument, and then actually I was just looking up something, reading something the other day, and I realized someone else made the same argument.
Yeah.
Where if I take the EMF detector and put it up to myself, it doesn't go off.
Right.
So if it doesn't go off when my spirit is in my body, why will it go off when my spirit's out of my body?
Right.
You know, so who knows? We still use them. We experiment with them.
Certainly.
The K2 meter itself, though, is very sensitive. That will spike at times when the tri-field meter or the other EMF detectors aren't picking up anything.
Exactly. Yes.
Is it possible that the spirit is actually manipulating that one device? Or are they able to get in there and affect the electronics somehow? In the paranormal, anything's possible. But what we're looking for are intelligent responses.
Right.
We're looking for some correlation, not just random spikes here and there. Now a spike with some kind of secondary evidence. We'll also measure the temperature.
Yes.
If the temperature drops and we get a spike at the same time, hey, maybe there's something there.
Right.
If there's a, another thing we'll do is we'll measure for carbon monoxide.
Yes.
Because we want to rule out any possible explanation. We'll take a carbon monoxide detector through.
Right.
Because there have been cases where people were exposed to carbon monoxide in their house and seeing ghosts.
Yeah.
So we want to rule that out.
Yes.
So these are some of the devices that we'll use, both through our baseline sweep and through the course of the investigation.
Right. We also use various different types of cameras. Not only just a normal digital camera to be able to do the baseline pictures. We always walk around and take pictures from every angle in every room, and we take them in duplicate. And the reason we do this is because later on, if we're taking video and there's something in the video that we're reviewing later that looks like a man standing in the corner, we have pictures that we took during the baseline sweep, often in the light, that we can refer to say, oh, well, that's just a coat rack that has, somebody's hat sitting on top of it.
Right.
But it also makes it so that it's easier for us to capture something, kind of catch it off guard. We can take the first picture and something will be in that picture. And in the second picture, we take just a second later, nothing is there. So it sort of gives us the opportunity to try to catch something, like I say, off guard.
Absolutely.
We use full spectrum cameras, some cameras that are able to see on the entire light spectrum. We use action cameras like the little GoPro cameras. We use a digital system, like a surveillance system. That we have 4 cameras that we run, and they often have night vision with them as well, and those surveillance systems. So, lots of different cameras.
So we show up to the investigation, and if for a good example of this, if you ever get a chance to check out our videos, it's called the Virginia Paranormal Case Files.
Yes.
And these are basically down to earth what really happens during a paranormal investigation. It's like watching a documentary maybe. It's not the stuff that you see on TV where people are jumping and there's music playing in the background. Yeah. It's basically us going through the investigation, talking about what we do, explaining it as we do it.
Right.
And we cut an 8-hour investigation down into an hour, 45 minutes to present, the core and the evidence.
Right.
So when we show up to these investigations, we'll sit down, we'll do the interview with the client. We'll find out all their reports. We'll try to investigate for any rational explanations to see if there's any reason this stuff could be happening. Any like I said, rational explanation. And then we'll do our baseline sweeps, baseline pictures, and we'll also monitor the temperature, the baseline temperature, to see if there's any fluctuations in that. Now, temperature is going to fluctuate, especially as it's getting cooler, as it's getting darker. But what we're looking for is you're standing in a room, and I've seen this happen firsthand, only once, I can say, where the temperature literally drops 10 degrees, and then boom, it's back up to normal.
Yes.
Something cold was just there.
Yes.
And the reason they measure for temperature is because it's a theory that spirits draw this energy from the atmosphere and create these cold spots.
Right.
But then we'll conduct the investigation using the various devices that we mentioned.
Yes.
And afterwards, we'll review all the evidence, listen to all the recordings, watch the videos, and we'll scan for any anomalies that might be there.
Right.
Now, let's talk a little bit about evidence.
Yes.
The evidence of the investigation.
Yes.
Okay? The first and foremost, orbs.
Oh, geez, yes, orbs. I sort of roll my eyes when people talk about orbs because so many people in the paranormal field and people that are interested in it will catch these pictures, these digital photographs where they have little balls of light. Sometimes they're transparent. Sometimes they're barely visible. Other times they're bright and they appear to be sort of emanate their own light or their own glow. And they say, oh, these are spirits. Well, that's not necessarily true. In digital photography over the years, the proximity of the lens to the flash has come closer and closer and closer and closer. And the closer these two elements on a camera come, the more likely you are to get what's called these orbs. Now, orbs can bear, or basically where the flash reflects off of something that's in the atmosphere. And a lot of times this object or this thing is not as far as it appears to be in the photograph. So in other words, you might have a speck of dust floating in front of the camera lens. You take a picture and it's got this white transparent sort of orb that forms. It looks like it's out in the middle of the room, but it's not. It's actually only inches from the lens. Now, at other times, people will photograph things that they say, oh, it's a fairy. I mean, I can't tell you how many people have taken pictures at night outside, and they catch these pictures that indeed do look like fairies on the photograph. But these are bugs. They're moths and bugs, all like those mosquito eaters, those big ones. They look a lot like a fairy when you take a photograph of them. Their wings are going, they're moving. There's a little bit of blur because there's motion. And because of that blur and the light that reflects off of these things, it often appears to be a fairy. So one woman came up and claimed that she had fairies living in her sofa at one time because she'd taken photographs in her house and had these bugs all around and evidently had assumed right from the start that they were fairies. So I'd say about 95% of the photographs that people get that are actual orbs or that look like orbs are actual dust motes, or they are water particles in the air, or there's some sort of bug, there's some sort of reasonable explanation. Even things as simple as a spider web in front of the camera can cause people to think, oh, what is that? It's floating across like this, and it's got there's a spot or two that's floating through the room. Well, it seems like the flash actually is illuminating on one or two points of the spider web as the spider web sort of floats across the camera's view. So fascinating thing, digital photography. We use so much of it, but we have to be able to say what is truly paranormal and what is not. And there are instances where people have seen with the naked eye, they've seen floating balls of light. I've seen one of them myself. So I know that indeed spirits do sometimes manifest as a giant glowing ball of light coming through your bedroom at night. And this is when we would say, yes, this orb is indeed something paranormal as opposed to a dust mote.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's been cases where people have reported this, where they've seen this ball of light with the naked eye, not just on camera.
Yes.
Now, this picture right here, this was taken at Fort Mifflin up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And if you look down near the doorway, you'll see the first anomaly, which is actually an insect. But these are pictures that people will actually look at and say, this is a fairy. This is something paranormal. This was a hot July day.
Yes.
It was very humid, and
lots of bugs.
There were bugs. But also just above that in the doorway, you see this light colored orb. Once again, a water particle. Like I said, it was very humid. We were getting these orbs all over.
Yes.
Here's another example taken from the tops of one of the ramparts on the fort, kind of looking out towards the airport way there.
Yeah.
And you can see there's one orb up in the top, and this is actually coming from a light glare from back there by the airport.
Yes.
The other ones that seem to be lighting up themselves, they seem like little lights. What would you say?
I would say they're most likely bugs. They're definite little specks of light that are occurring all through. And it seems like the flash is most likely illuminating these bugs flying around Fort Mifflin.
And you've taken a picture of a person before at night, and you see their face sometimes, depending on where the camera is, it's all whitewashed. It really is. And that's what happens to the bugs. It just gets completely whitewashed. The light reflects off them.
Yes.
And they appear like they're lighting up when they're really not.
Right.
Now, this picture right here was taken of the team some years ago, standing in front of the famous ferry plantation down in Virginia Beach. And once again, you will see some orbs in the picture. It was a summer day. You'll see some water particles in the air. There's a bright orb up by the window, which looks like it's most likely a water particle. But there's also, and another thing, you look at this orb and people will be like, well, how's a water particle that big? It looks like if it comes down on that guy's head, it's going to drown him. No, it's not actually back there by that guy's head. It's actually much closer to the lens than it appears in the picture. But if you zoom in on this window to the lower left, there actually is something in that window.
Yes.
When Heather, she was the one that was the curator of the plantation at the time, and she said, if anybody is here when I take this picture, get in the picture with us. Let's see you. And when you zoom in on this window, sure enough, it looks like there's a little boy peeking out of that window. This is clearly not a reflection. It looks like you can see his hairline.
Right.
It looks like something. So look at the pictures close.
Yes.
You see orbs? Still look closer. Don't look at a picture and see all these orbs and be like, oh, that's just water and dust. Zoom in on the windows.
Yes.
Pay very close attention
Absolutely.
to what you're looking at in this evidence.
Yes.
But I want to thank you all for tuning in to this lecture, and hopefully next year we'll be able to see you in person.
Right.
Up at the library. We give these lectures at some various places here and there, and different kinds of lectures as well. So to kind of stay in tune with where we're going to be and what we're going to be doing, you can follow our website. Check out our website, vaparanormal.com. It's got all our links and stuff on there.
Right.
But I got to put up a warning, all right? Our YouTube channel is youtube.com/Virginia Paranormal.
Right.
Virginia Paranormal is a YouTube channel. If you go on there, be warned. Not everything is extremely ghost hunting, paranormal.
Yeah.
Okay? We'll put up two types of videos. One will be the case files.
Yes.
Or if it's called a haunting in, a certain place.
Yes.
It's going to be a paranormal investigation. And
Right.
if that's what you're interested in, that's all you want to see that. But I also, some time ago, I started documenting a window into the life of a ghost hunter.
Right.
And said, for fun, just for us to look back on and laugh and talk, and just to show people that might be interested what goes on, let's just run video throughout the entire adventure, throughout the entire weekend, throughout the entire trip, and just show people basically what life is like on the road.
Right.
That's where gas grub and ghosts come in. So if you happen to click on a gas grub and ghosts, be forewarned, you're not going to know what in the world you're watching. And if you got somebody that doesn't like ghost hunting, you're the person that's like, oh man, I wish my significant other would sit down and watch paranormal investigations with me, but they won't. Show them gas grub and ghosts.
Yes.
Because I'll get calls all the time from people that are like, I really like you guys and I can't stand paranormal stuff.
Yeah.
So they just watch that, like their wife watches our paranormal videos and they watch the gas grub and ghosts because
They want
it
to see
is what it
we eat.
is.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yes.
But thank you for watching once again, everybody. If you post your comments, your questions down below, we normally do a Q&A at this point.
Right.
If you post your questions down below, we'll do our best to respond, to answer to any of the questions, and just give us some time because it may not be immediate, but we'll do our best to check back on this video over the following weeks and try to respond to some questions.
Right.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Yes.
And everybody, have a good night.